Alright, this will be the second video for October 25th and October 26th. We ended here simplifying, rearranging this identity, dividing by cosine squared to get this identity. I suggested dividing by sine squared to see if you can come up with the second one. We're going to talk briefly about these identities. I'm not going to do this problem at the bottom, but if you want to try it, that's fine. But here, we have the graphs of sine and cosine. We're going to talk about these identities, and that'll be it. So we have the graph of sine is this solid line here, and this is the graph of cosine, the dotted line. So what we want to look at is they have the same shape, and we know that we can do different things to transform our function. So for example, if we had cosine of x plus 7, hopefully we can recall that this means to move the function, shift the entire function up 7 units. Now, what we want to try to do here is write sine, do something to sine the graph of sine so that it's directly on top of cosine. And so what a lot of students said is if you just look at this point here, if we were to move it there and do that for all of our points, right, then it would be directly on top of cosine. So we can move it to the left. It looks like pi over 2 units. That's one thing we could do. Okay. Or we can move it to the right pi over 2 units. So 1 pi over 2 units. And so that would make it look something like this. And keep going. But I need it to be down here, so we can move it to the right pi over 2. But if we move it to the right pi over 2, we would also need to reflect it. If we reflected it, it would be directly on top of cosine. Now, we could use either form. We're going to use this one, and hopefully I can give a simple explanation for why we're going to use that. But what we can do is, now we said that's sine. So if we think about it, we'll start with sine. Let's think about what we would need to do to move to the right pi over 2. Here we said we add 7 outside, that moves it up. So we know we're going to be inside our function, so it's going to be x and pi over 2. But hopefully we can recall to move to the right pi over 2, we would have to do x minus pi over 2. And then we also need to reflect. And so hopefully we also remember that to reflect, the negative goes here in front. So it'll be negative sine of x minus pi over 2. And that will equal cosine of x. Now we can do something here. Sine is an odd function, which means if there's a negative, we can move it inside. For this case, if we do that, that becomes negative x plus pi over 2. And just to clean it up a little bit, make that move the negative in there, it would be sine of pi over 2 minus x is equal to cosine. Okay, so this here, we can go from there to there because sine of x is an odd function. Alright. And so the reason we chose this is because we can put it in this form. And what's happening in the parentheses, that's going to be the same for all our functions. What I mean by that is, we can say now that sine of pi over 2 minus x we just saw is cosine of x. We can also say that cosine of pi over 2 minus x, well, that's going to be sine of x. Tangent of pi over 2 minus x will be cotangent. Secant of pi over 2 minus x is cosecant.
Mr. Scanlon, if you can keep it clear for one more hour, that'll be 3:45. It'll be much appreciated, sir. Thank you.
Well, there you go. And so we have these cofunction identities. The reason we chose the pi over 2 minus x is because that's the same for all of our functions, and we have a cofunction identity. Now if you need to pause it, go back, ask questions, please do so. The idea of what we did today is that we are building our toolbox. We're coming up with good tools that we can use to simplify different expressions. Now, we didn't simplify any expressions here. We just developed them. On October 27th and October 28th, we will simplify expressions, trigonometric expressions. Please, if you have questions, especially on why these work, but especially October 27th and October 28th, please reach out. We're starting to get into a unit that is very different than anything we've done. So I want to make sure that you have all the resources that we need to access the content in full. If you have questions, email me, reach me through Remind App, all of those things that you can do. Hopefully this was helpful.